Chapter 8. I stumbled backward through the kitchen door and stood outside, feeling miserable and beginning to be angry. It wasn't a crime for a guest to enter the feather-bed kitchen. The door opened. The serving maid I'd collided with slipped out. "Mistress, I'm sorry about the dishes. I didn't—" The maid shook her head, causing the ribbons on her cap to jingle. "It was my fault. I've been stepping wrong all morning." She was a pretty girl, near my age. I envied her appealing, heart-shaped face. "Will you or Frying Pan have to pay for the plates?" "No. Someone breaks something every few—" "Sweet, what's worrying you? Us? Paying for the crockery? You sweet." But then why had Frying Pan yelled at me? A Frying Pan would yell at the king if he came into her kitchen. "Are you hungry?" I admitted I was. The maid, whose name was Isoli, slipped back into the kitchen and returned with 2 muffins and a russet apple wrapped in a napkin. Then she went back to her duties. I was sorry to see her go. I returned to my explorations, nibbling on a muffin. The apple I placed in my pocket to toss away later. When the second muffin was almost gone, I heard a man singing and people laughing. The entrance to the Hall of Song was a few yards ahead. I believed I was hearing the composing game, my favorite. At home, I excelled at it. I finished eating and stopped in the doorway to listen. Here I wouldn't collide with anyone. Here I wouldn't be noticed. A courtier was leaving the stage, circling around a mound of books. It was the composing game. A dozen people sat in the front row of seats, Prince Ajori among them, Uchu at his feet. The dog raised her head and then raced up the aisle to me, tail wagging enthusiastically. Oh no! Everyone turned to look. I put one hand in front of my face, curtsied, and began to leave. A woman's voice called out, "Wait!" I stopped. Uchu put her paws on my chest and tried to lick my face. The prince exclaimed, "Uchu, down! Come!" The dog ran to him. The woman came up the aisle to me. She was Lady Arona, the damsel who'd sung to the king and queen on the receiving line, the one who'd made Ivy jealous. Today she wore a violet gown with a lace fan collar. In place of a bonnet, she wore a pearl headband. She looked fetching. "Providence has come to rescue you, or Ijori," she cried gaily. She curtsied to me. I curtsied, feeling my blush begin. She said, "The prince has been telling us and telling us that he'd do better with a partner, and here you are." She held out her hand. "Please join our game." Her face was gleeful. Was she being cruel? Perhaps she thought it amusing to pair the prince with a gargoyle like me. I wanted to refuse, but I feared what might happen if I did. They were courtiers. I was an innkeeper's daughter. I curtsied again and took her hand. Prince Ajori, looking disconcerted, said, "Arona, the young lady doesn't want to rescue a hopeless case." He didn't want to sing with me. I wished I knew what to say to get us both out of it, but I was too shy to speak, even if I'd had the words. "Rescue a prince?" Lady Arona said. "Of course she does." Prince Ajori turned up his palms in defeat. "I'll welcome any help he can provide." Lady Arona started down the aisle, towing me by my hand. My hips and Dame Ethel's skirts couldn't fit in the aisle with her. I followed at an awkward angle. When I reached the others, they stood to greet me. I wanted to sink through the floor. The prince said, "You're the Duchess of Elixir's friend, aren't you?" He remembered the fool I'd made of myself in the receiving line. He added, "Lady—" I didn't want to say I wasn't a lady, which would embarrass everyone, but I couldn't say I was Aza. To my horror, Prince Ajori introduced me to everybody. There was a flurry as they curtsied or bowed. I curtsied as he announced each name. The names flew by. There were a count, at least 2 sirs, several ladies, a baroness, and a duke. At last it was over, but then one of the women said, "Where do you hail from, Lady Aza?" My throat was dry. They waited. Trying to help, Prince Ajori said, "Do you live near the Duchess?" If he'd been right, I'd only have to nod. I shook my head. "Amanta." My voice was a croak. One of the men said, "That's near Kyria. Do they even know how to play the composing game there?" Irritation gave me a bit more voice. "We play often." Lady Arona said, "Pray, tell us your impressions of Antio Castle." My impressions? The cook was unfriendly. The nobility were too friendly. The prince was kind. I sent him a look of appeal. "I see your design, Arona," he said. "You've begun to fear Lady Azza will outdo you, so you want to postpone your turn." "No such thing. Let the competition continue." She turned my way. "You're next after me. Count Amosa, please." Next? The Count, a middle-aged man in scarlet hose, picked a thick tome from the pile of books and skimmed through it. "Ah, here. This part." I took a seat at the end of the row, a seat away from Prince Ajori. Uchu sprawled on the floor between us. My heart was racing. Singing was the best part of me. If I could make any sound come from my throat, perhaps I could do well. Lady Arona took the book and started up the stage. Prince Ajori whispered, "She's one of our best composers." She looked over her selection. "Amosa, I didn't believe you capable of such cruelty." The books used in the composing game are dense and dull. The referee selects a passage, and the singer must invent a melody on the spot. The singer is allowed to repeat words, but not to change any. When all the players have sung, everyone votes on which tune was best. In the composing game, best means silliest, the tune that made everyone laugh the hardest. Arona began to sing. The tune she came up with was martial and dramatic. She could have been singing about a battle. "The Upuko pig is prone to boils." Lady Arona sang stirringly about the many methods of lancing a pig's boil. I laughed along with everyone else. The prince laughed most merrily of all. When she finished, we all waved our hands in the air. She curtsied and left the stage. I was going to have to stand on the stage. I'd never been on a stage. At home we didn't use one. Prince Ajori whispered to me, "We'll do respectively. That's the most I ever hope for." He looked rueful. "And the most I ever achieve." Then he smiled. I was too frightened to smile back. We rose and approached Count Amosa. He marked a page in a book and gave me the book, which I dropped. I bent down for it. The Count and Prince Ajori bent down too. I knocked heads with the Count. Prince Ajori picked up the book and passed it to me. We both mounted the stage, followed by Uchu. I clutched my book so hard my fingers hurt. I raised it to hide my face. My book was the second volume of The Encyclopedia of Sleep. Prince Ajori had volume 1. The procedure for duets is for each player to sing a sentence in turn. Then, at the end of their passages, they start over, both singing their separate pieces at the same time. Prince Ajori courteously let me go first. "Show me what I must aspire to." It's advantageous to be first. The first singer sets the tone, but I couldn't concentrate on the page. The letters seemed to be squiggles. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again. The squiggles formed words. My passage was harder than Lady Arona's, because it was less tedious. The duller the subject, the easier to inspire laughter. My section contained suggestions for people who have trouble falling asleep, and if some present had that difficulty, they would be genuinely interested. I'd have to struggle against their interest. I read the passage and tried to think of a single idea. Count Amosa said, "Highness and lady, please begin." Uchu whined. I curtsied and looked out over the heads of my audience, too frightened to make a sound. People shifted in their seats. I wanted the prince to think well of me, but he wouldn't if my throat was paralyzed. He wouldn't if I lost the game for him.